We're going to begin with something that everybody has, a body, and work our way up to a gimbal.
Let's begin with a fundamental that applies across the board. The ninja walk.
In order to ninja walk, you'll have to rock from your heel to your toe while walking forward, and your toe to your heel when walking backward.
And make sure you have a good bend in your knees.
The reason you do this is to reduce the amount of shock from your natural steps. I'm not saying this will completely solve the shaky footage, but it will help the most, and it will also teach you how to be more confident in public. Learning to walk is great and all,
but there are a few other things that will help you no matter what tool you use. Frame rate, lens choice, and reference points.
frame rate can help take you and your ninja walk and make your footage extremely useful. The faster the frame rate that you choose, 30, 60, or 120 FPS, the less noticeable the little jitters become when you slow the footage down in editing. That's usually an easy fix. However, I would say try and push yourself at 24 FPS with the techniques you just learned. You may find new ways to do things.
When it comes to lenses, the wider, the better. The wider that you go with your lens, the less noticeable the micro jitters are, and the more dramatic your motions become. The tighter the focal length, the more noticeable the jitters, unless your lens has a certain option on it, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Then there are reference points. Honestly, these are super helpful for you to get smooth motions in camera because you have something in the frame to focus on. Plus, in editing, it'll help you smooth out your footage even further.
So let's learn about the first tool that you have at your disposal, your hands. This tool is actually attached to the other tool that works in tandem with the first tool, your whole body.
Joking aside, the biggest part of shooting handheld is getting your whole body involved. We'll start from the hands and the camera themselves before we work our way down to include the rest of the body. The first thing that you should focus on when you're shooting handheld is your points of contact with the camera. Much like a 3-axis gimbal, you need 3 points of contact to the camera. The best way to start is by having one hand on the grip and one on the lens. Then, use your wrist to support the camera body. If you have a camera strap, you can use that and push your camera away from you to create tension against your neck.
This has given me neck cramps in the past, so I don't really use this one often.
Let's connect this to the rest of the body. Really sit into your legs and use them to support the weight of the camera and move smoothly. Tuck your arms in and keep the camera closer to your body but not touching, unless you're still and just panning. Once you've done all those things, the weight of the camera won't be sitting only in your arms. Then all you have to do is move your upper body as a whole to get smooth motions. Speaking of camera weight, the heavier, the better.
Now I know this sounds counterintuitive, but trust me.
It's almost like holding a dumbbell steady versus your phone. You'll have better luck with more weight and the shakes will be less since your arms, when engaged, act like natural shock absorbers.
I mean, it's crazy what the body can do. That being said, definitely know your limits.
It's hard to be a human gimbal while shooting handheld, but do get creative to learn your limits.
Handheld shooting opens up so many possibilities. Plus, one other thing to push these techniques to the max is stabilization.
Let me be more specific. There are a couple different types of stabilization. The first and most useful kind is actually in your lens. It's a little switch on your lens that says VC, VR, IS, OS, anyways. When flipping the switch on, your lens will then compensate for any of the shakes that it detects. The second would be IBIS, or in-body stabilization, which is only in a select few cameras.
This feature actually happens with your camera's sensor.
Every shake the camera detects is then logged, and the opposite motion is applied to the sensor itself to stabilize the footage. So the sensor inside the camera actually moves. The third, which is in most cameras nowadays, is digital image stabilization, which is all done with software inside the camera, which results in a small crop, but works pretty well. Especially in the Blackmagic 6K Pro, where it stores the gyroscope data in the footage so that, when you take it into DaVinci, there will be an option in the stabilization tab that says gyro, which will take that stored data and apply the stabilization in accordance to that data.
In other words, a gimbal that's a camera. I love that camera.
Now that we've looked inside the camera and lens for cool features, let's look into the camera box for another tool that's guaranteed with every camera: the camera strap. Besides using it to give you neck pain or have a fancy necklace, you can cradle your camera like a baby. I'd say this trick is one step before a top handle where gravity does all the work. For this trick, wrap the main part of the strap around the lens and lift up on the dangling sides, and voila, you have a floating camera that you can use with one hand. Apply the same techniques as handheld shooting for this technique and use your wrist to pan.
Since we're working our way up the ladder with gear from hands to camera straps, the next logical thing would be a tripod. We're gonna use the tripod just a little different than normal.
Of course, it gives you static shots, which are nice, but it also gives you weight to the camera. Take the handheld techniques, pick up your camera on the tripod, and get to work. It adds weight and helps stability. Plus, you can also extend one leg and start using it as a monopod. Tripods are super useful.
It just takes some creativity to find out. Make sure to check out the description below for the links to the best gear that I've found in different price ranges.
Now, if you've made it this far, let's get to the big bad beast of stabilization, the gimbal. We've gone from no budget to now some budget. Now, there's something that's really important that you need to learn when using any gimbal or stabilizer, and that's how to properly balance it. This will save your gimbal from burning out its motors and your stabilizer from being impossible to use.
The reason why gimbals and stabilizers are the best options for stable footage is because they can actually account for the different axes of movement precisely while your body and your hands can't. Plus, combining that with the techniques from handheld shooting, you'll get the best stable footage since you'll be the one accounting for the up and down movements that the gimbal cannot.
I'll go over the basics of balancing a gimbal. The gimbal I'm using is the DJI RS3 Pro, and I'll start with a fixed lens to make balancing easier. Start with the tilt axis. Make sure your camera sits level with the fine adjustment knob first, then do the drop test. Once you see which way the camera goes, adjust the tilt axis up and down until you can then tilt the camera up or down, and it will stay in the position that you left it. If you get close and it's just ever so slightly off, just use the fine adjustment knob to move the camera forward and backward. Once you have that dialed in, move on to the roll axis. Adjust the arm until, once again, you can put the camera into any position left or right and it will stay. Finally, move on to the pan axis. Tilt the whole entire gimbal to the left. If the camera spins counterclockwise, it's too front heavy, and clockwise means that it's too back heavy. Adjust the arm forwards and backwards accordingly. When you've balanced your entire gimbal, once again, none of the arms should move. After you double, triple, and quadruple check that you've balanced your gimbal correctly, make sure that you hold the trigger on the front of your handle and the mode button on the back of the handle at the same time, so that then you can begin the calibration process. Seriously, make sure you've done this right or your gimbal may not last very long. One other thing that will affect your footage when using a gimbal is the stabilization features we talked about earlier in this video. Make sure those are all turned off since they may actually work against your gimbal for smooth footage. Apply the ninja walk and use your upper body to move the rig as a whole, and you'll get really good smooth footage. One thing that's important is to use a straight line forward or backward to walk. This is where your upper body needs to swivel to face the subject while your lower body stays forward or backward.
So yes, gimbals are pretty complicated.
They're fun to use when you figure it out, but it will be a learning curve. Whew, the workout ends here. Let's sit down in front of the computer and go over some ways to further smooth out the footage that you just shot. I'll show Premiere and After Effects first before jumping into DaVinci. So, Premiere. So I've already brought the footage in and I've already slowed it down. That way I can just show you guys the different effects within the programs. So let's start with Warp Stabilizer. Most of you may already know about it. However, it works pretty well when it works. So let's actually see, let's pull it in right now, Warp Stabilizer. And since I've already slowed it down, I have to do one other thing. I have to come in here, nest it. That way I can add on Warp Stabilizer and still have my retime effects. So now we'll slap Warp Stabilizer on. It'll analyze in the background and I'll show you guys how it looks just
default without tweaking any settings.
Bing. All right, stabilized it. So yeah, warp stabilizer. So that's warp stabilizer by default. If you want to bring the scale, you can bring it down like this. I'll show you the clip just off the get-go. It's not very smooth.
Okay.
Not very smooth at all. So it is a bit of a beast to work with. So it did a decent job. Let's turn it on. I changed it down to 20%, and yeah, you still get some of that wobble. So if this happens, you can right click on this and you can go replace with After Effects composition, and it will bring this clip straight into After Effects, where we will do the next style of stabilizing footage. Now, what we will do is we will head over into the tracker tab. Once you do this, all you have to do is hit track motion. Then it'll bring up this little track point, and you can zoom in just by using your scroll wheel. And once you have this tracker point, let's scroll through the clip and just find kind of a reference point that we can use. So I'm going to use the headlight. Let's head to a nice clean frame. There we go. So let's zoom in real fast and drag this bad boy over the headlight. You want a nice high contrast area to focus on, that way the tracking can really like stick to it. So now that we have that placed, let's just move this second box, which is telling the program to look at these areas before it actually makes the correct tracking data. Then I'm also going to boost this up, because I think if we have the whole headlight kind of like this, let's just give ourselves a good little area. That way we can track it nicely. So now that we're in the middle, let's hit analyze backward, and let's see how well it sticks to this headlight. Okay, so it did a pretty good job. Now let's head back to the first track point, and we will track it forward. All right, you know, it actually stuck pretty well. You can always go back if it gets like way off, and you can actually go to the point where it's way off, move this box back to where it is, and then you can continue to, then you can track forward from there, and it should hopefully fix the issue. Otherwise, you're gonna be going in frame by frame and making those adjustments yourself. Now that it's tracked, what we're gonna have to do is come in here, let's duplicate this layer for the nested sequence. That way we can go pre-compose, move all attributes to new composition, then we'll come in here, edit target, and we'll just have it for this first layer, since you'll probably have to pre-comp it when you first bring it in, but I don't want to lose my tracking points since I forgot that step. So now that we have that, all we have to do is just make sure that target is there. It's on this first layer, which is the nested clip that we just made, and hit apply. Once you hit apply, it'll pop up with this little box. You can do X and Y, X only, or Y only. I'm gonna keep it on X and Y and hit OK. So now that I've done that, let's hide this bottom layer. You'll see that it's tracked to that headlight. But you'll see these black bars. Why is that? The reason is because it's tracking that headlight. And this is how it's stabilized. So now all we need to do is just hit S on our keyboard with the first layer selected, and then we can just scale this up to get rid of those black bars. And if we need to move it, you'll see if we hit P, we cannot move this layer or it will really mess up the tracking. So what we have to do instead is we have to make a new, like right click, new, null object, and then you'll come into here, grab this little pick whip over here about parent and link, drag that up to the null layer, so that way we can come on to the null layer, hit P, then we can position it, and it won't change any of this tracking data here. Once you've done that, you'll have a track masterpiece. This clip is really difficult. Not gonna lie, this clip is very, very difficult. So it did a pretty decent job. Go in and really fine tune where you want to track and make sure that the reference points are good, and try your best to have a better clip, or else you're going to be going in by hand, doing it frame by frame, So now that you have this, another thing that you can do is we can come in here, let's select these two, and we can also pre-compose this again by right-clicking and hit pre-composing, move it all to the attributes to the new layer, and then we can also even try warp stabilizer on this as well. Let's change this to 20 just to sort of give it a nice little starting point, and we'll see how it does after it analyzes. It's a little better than before, but let's just try position out and see what it does. You can scroll through, change position, scale, rotation, perspective, smooth motion, or you can come down into the advanced as well, do a detailed analysis, make sure you click fast analysis off, and see how it does then. Works.
Nice.
That's not terrible, way better than how it started. I honestly should have chose a better clip, so my apologies for that, but at least you got to see the techniques and how they can work. Plus, the other cool thing, just a really quick note before we head into DaVinci Resolve, is when you're hitting Command S or Control S and saving in this, it automatically updates it in Premiere. That part's pretty nice, but let's move on to DaVinci Resolve.
Yeah, boy.
I'm going to show you two different ways. There's the stabilization tab, which is amazing by default. And then if that doesn't work, we're going to take it into another section of DaVinci called Fusion. So let's just start out with our normal stabilization. You'll see I have this clip that's already slowed down. So it's not terrible, but it can definitely use some stabilization.
Okay.
So let's just test out perspective and see how it does just straight off the bat. Pretty darn good, if you ask me.
Wow.
I love DaVinci. So the other really nice part is you have all these different options: perspective, similarity, translation, and for instance, camera gyro. That is only because I shot this on the 6K Pro. And with the camera gyro, this thing is absolutely incredible. Let me just stabilize this clip real fast. And it basically makes my handheld moves look just like a gimbal. And just to really show you, let's turn the stabilization off. This is the before. Slowed down. Just a tiny bit jittery, you know. Nothing's perfect when you're shooting handheld. Let's say those options didn't work. What you can do is select your clip, come into Fusion, and this is how it'll initially pull up. You click on this little viewer right here just to have the single viewer, and then what you're going to do is hit Shift Space, which will then pull up your little toolbox here, and you're just going to type PT, and that should give you the planar tracker. You'll select that and hit Add. It puts it automatically into your little node tree right here. That way you're connected through the media in and then go into the media out. What you do from there, have it on track right over here. You'll change it from point to hybrid point area. Now, what you're going to do is find a focal point in the middle of your entire thing. Hit set. That way you have a new set of data. You can zoom in by holding Control or Command in scroll wheel. And then you're just going to make a little box or something around your reference point that we talked about earlier. Once you've done that, all you have to do is hit track to start. It'll track it all the way back to the start of the clip. And once that is done, you just have to hit go so that it takes you back to that first set point that we had at the beginning. Then you'll hit track to end. Once that is finished, you can then change this from track to steady or stabilize. Now this one is kind of funky because let's head back into track. We have it on perspective. So what we can do to really make sure it doesn't get all wonky with the perspective is literally just change the mode to translation. So let's just do translation. Oh, we have to come back to track. We have to hit go, set, restart, track to the beginning, track to the end again. Then you can hit steady. Now you'll have a steady clip that is locked on to your reference point. Once you have this, you just have to hit Shift Spacebar again and type in XF, which should give you a transform node. The reason why we're doing this is because you don't want to have these black areas when you have your footage like stabilized. So with this transform node, all we're going to do is just increase the size until those black bars are gone. Once that is done, just scrub through your clip and check that all the black bars are gone, and boom, there you go. Now you have a stabilized clip. So that's one way to do it, and you can get a cool little tracking effect that way as well. You can also combine the two if it's really necessary. So after you've done that, you can come in here, right click, back in the edit page, make sure you're back in the edit page, right click on the clip that you just tracked, make a new compound clip, enter, and all you have to do then is just hit stabilize. Once you've done that, then you'll have a really nice tracked and stabilized clip. That way you have two things working for you at once. So that is DaVinci Resolve. Now that you're exhausted and worked really hard to learn new ways to get better stable footage, get out there and create some awesome things. But maybe get some sleep first. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to tune into more videos just like this one. And if you want more videos just like this, consider hitting that join button to support the channel. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and maybe even learned something, and I will catch you guys in the next one.
Okay, I think that's the one. The sun keeps coming out. I really hope my camera doesn't shut off from overheating. It's so hot.
DaVinci really is where it's at. My goodness. I'm happy I made the switch. Whew. Especially with the AI thing. DaVinci does not take your stuff to train AI, unlike Adobe. Just saying.
Okay.